Good morning. You are here with Jay Marsden, Marsden Law Group for Money in the Law. My good friend, John Drohan, Main Effort Financial, Jay Marsden. And we hope you are enjoying your fine Saturday. We get the team here with us. Christian's here, man in the camera, making us look handsome. And today, actually, you put a couple of microphones on us. Apparently, they must have got a couple of calls into the studio that said, while we love looking at them, I can't hear what they're saying.
What are they saying?
So if you could just mic them up, that'd be super. That'd be super. So we have Money in the Law, My FM, and we're talking all things money, all things law. How are you, friend?
I'm good.
Yes.
One of the things that I love about the Saturday morning show is that not only is it on the radio, and of course there's a lot of people up right now that's the first thing that they put on, and they because they want to start their weekend off right. They want to start their weekend off in such a way that they're setting themselves up for success.
Well, here's what I imagine happens. I imagine that everyone, as you mentioned, gets up, has a cup of coffee, has whatever type of light weekend breakfast they might have, right? Be it a scone or a bagel or an English muffin.
Who gets up and eats at 7?
Okay, and has something, right? And listens to the show. Then, as their day progresses and they're out and about on the soccer field, for example, there's a lot of this going on. Hey, did you listen to Money in the Law today? Because
I caught the back end of it.
I didn't catch all of it.
We were going to Wayland for a game today.
Yeah, I ripped it up at Sully's house last night. I was a little slow out of the gate this morning. I missed the first 15 minutes of the show. What did they talk about? It sounded like they were talking about...
I recorded it.
Yes.
I recorded it on... I record on Holliston Cable Access TV.
Having to go back and download it live
but I also recorded it
at WMRCDailyNews.com. I would much rather just tell me what they talked about.
On a voice memo.
That's right.
I recorded it on my phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
So then you can listen to you can watch your kid play soccer, and you can listen to our show, and you can get all kinds of from.
It's almost like that NFL Live. You know how when you have your when guys are they have to watch the game. It happens with us a lot too. People want to listen to Money in the Law when they're doing something. They want to multitask.
That's right.
Which we don't necessarily. I don't think we do it very well. And I'm not going to promote multitasking.
No,
in fact,
there's no such thing. There's a lot of talk about it, but there's no such thing. You can't do a lot of things really well all the time. You got to focus and concentrate.
I have trouble doing one thing well. All the time.
Either the show or financial advising or whatever it might be. Softball,
so that's why everything's right here. Everything's right now. All my attention is on this. So, like you said, we will talk about things, everything about money that you can think of, everything about the legal system that you can think of, because both of us have a lot of experience with the legal system. We have experience
both sides of the desk,
both sides of the cell.
I've been on both sides of the aisle,
both sides of the fence.
Yep, both sides of the aisle.
But the great thing about it is we'll talk about it in such a way that you will not only understand it, but you'll enjoy it and you'll appreciate it, and that's why people talk about it at the soccer games. That's why people talk about it at bar mitzvahs, parties,
barbecues,
weddings, anything like that.
It's all encompassing. It's all encompassing. Do you I want to read my own vows, and I want to use some of the things I learned off of Money in the Law. I want to bake those into my vows. I take you to honor, love, cherish as part of a well-diversified 70-30 balanced portfolio looking for long-term growth with a fraction of the risk and volatility of the market, and in true love and asset protection planning until one of us goes to a nursing home, which won't happen because if we do go, we're not going to pay anything anyway because we did really good planning. I do.
That's a tears coming down my eye.
Oh my God!
Right?
I mean, it's an emotional moment for everybody in the church. And you know what's even better? Yeah. On each of them, on the bride and the groom, one of them has on the back of their shoulders money, and the other one has law.
Right.
You can pick anyone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be.
It's a beautiful match.
That's it right there.
Match
made in heaven. So
for those of you who are wondering exactly,
those of you who are still listening,
what we're talking about.
So I was thinking today. This comes up every couple of years. It always seems to coincide with a certain party, a certain political party taking over control of Washington.
Don't you get political.
There's not going to get political, but a certain party takes over control of Washington, and this thing resurfaces. I mean,
we're going to make some changes. We're going to fix what's broken.
We're going to make a tiny amount of changes so we can keep the entire legal profession fully employed. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the estate tax. Yeah. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. It's come up again as a result of the political winds changing out of Washington, D.C. Again, it comes up over and over
So
and over again.
wait a minute. Is estate tax, does that have anything to do with estate planning?
Oh, you know what? Very funny you mentioned that.
Coincidentally.
There's some overlap to those two conversations. Very much so.
Do you
Very
know,
much
now
so.
if I'm going to do the proper estate planning, is there any type of profession that I should hire in order to make that estate planning, I guess you would call it a plan or a course of action to make it legal?
It's my understanding that most folks who do estate planning do it from the vantage point of a law degree. That's my understanding. And being a lawyer,
those are the ones that are allowed to do it.
Actually, cards say the words estate planning.
Can you zoom in on that?
Yep. But again, this comes up all the time, and I got to tell you, I mean, we've joked about it on the show in the past. One of the things that planners don't like is they don't like a lack of consistency, right? And as much as everybody jokes about it and says, "Oh my God, there might be some changes to the estate planning laws again," the only reason you guys do this is to keep yourself gainfully employed. Not true. Not true.
You're not making
not true.
You're not making the law. No. I don't make the law.
Nope, just follow it.
I just
follow
enforce it. Interpret it.
I just bend it. Yep. But the idea is that every time somebody comes to power, if you will, takes over control of Congress, they always come up with a plan. It's always a tax plan. There's always a plan for infrastructure spending. There's always
a budget plan.
There's a budget plan, and the estate tax isn't. It's not low hanging fruit, but it sounds like low hanging fruit.
Well, let's talk. Well, why is that? Why is estate tax always something? And it's not rocket science, right? It's because it's a way of the government to get more money. It is a tax. By definition, when the government imposes a tax, they're doing it in order to make money. That's how governments make money. They tax you. They
basically tax you on all kinds of transfers. They tax you on transfers of real property while you're alive. They tax you on, depending on what type of gifting strategy you're doing, if you're over certain thresholds or certain limits. They tax you on the sale of securities, and then they tax you on the transfer of property, sometimes from one generation, if you will, to the next generation.
It's the same thing as if, so you in a law practice. So let's say if as you're practicing law, there was an opportunity where if you said, well, if you're a lawyer and you call up, a cable company for a client and say, I'd like to, renegotiate my bill, and then you can charge, $2,000 to do that, then it's another source of your income, right?
That's
so
right.
You'd be like, now I'm not an estate planning attorney, I'm a cable planning attorney.
No. I'd be a UCC attorney is what I'd be. I'm working on, so I mean, so
it's another income source potentially if the estate tax adjusts, right?
That's right.
So that's one reason why that the government that everybody's like, hey, because that's what it is. They come in okay, here's how much we owe, here's what our deficit is, here's how much we make. How can we make more money? What can we do?
Right.
Or here's how much here's what our deficit is. It's not that big. How can we kind of please some constituents that, oh, by the way, maybe we made a few promises during our campaign, say we're going to probably lower estates or make things better. How can we put those into action?
Well, the politics of it aside, essentially what you're doing is in some cases, some folks would say you're placating a part of your base, if you will, that in many cases are your biggest donors, and that represent, you're back to this 1% piece of it.
That's political.
That is political. That's why I said politics aside.
You said politics aside, but it's not aside. Just threw it in the middle of the
But if you say that, you can still say whatever you want afterwards and have to be really political because you said politics aside. It's like saying present company excluded. You're not that nice a guy.
Or it's like,
right?
it's no offense, but
as long as you qualify, you're fine. You can do whatever you want to do.
No offense, Jay, but your jacket, no.
No offense, but I think you're a terrible attorney. Oh, none taken. Offense not taken.
No
That's
offense,
fine.
but I'm not enjoying this.
So once you qualify,
no offense, Christian, but you're awfully loud during this whole thing.
Right. Politics aside.
Keep it down.
Politics aside. But the other thing is, for a lot of folks, you mentioned it's low-hanging fruit in the sense that tax policy, nobody wants to get into, carried interest deductions and losses and everyone's head starts spinning. Everybody gets this. Everybody gets this. This is easy. Oh, you're going to get rid of the estate tax? You mean if my mother and father leave me a couple of pieces of property and they pass away, and you're going to make it so that I get those tax free?
So I don't have to pay.
Everybody gets that, right? Everybody gets that.
40% tax on top of everything above $5 million, $5.4 million.
And they frame it differently, and they call it a death tax, and then they start to make you believe that you would be subject to it, but for our
death tax always sounds better.
Well, that's what.
Don't die.
That's
or you will
exactly
get
what they
charged
did.
death tax.
That's exactly what, when they talked about this early on and they talked about changing this, that's how they got this to be a real hot button issue, was to say not only is it a death tax, so now they're making it seem like everybody pays it when the numbers show you that very few people pay it in the grand scheme of things. But that's how they sort of bring this thing to the forefront. And they make it seem like it applies to everybody. And everybody understands it. Everybody gets it. It's easy to kind of wrap your head around it. So that's well, after we get back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about that.
I so need a break.
just already diving into the estate tax?
Well, no, it's emotional. I like tax. I like talking about tax. That's a big part of kind of the whole financial planning world. I mean, taxes are, that gets people's attention.
Nobody likes them. Nobody likes them.
If they love saving money.
I can save you some money. Everyone's listening.
Everyone. What? What'd you say?
Yep. Everybody leans in.
Get me another burger, and I'll show you how to save some money. We'll be right back on Money in the Law here with Jay Marsden from the Marsden Law Group, Financial Group. He does financial too. John Drohan from Main Effort Financial. We'll be right back, Money in the Law. And we're back here on Money in the Law on MyFM 101.3. I'm John Drohan, and I'm with Jay Marsden, and I'm with Christian from the Holliston Cable Access TV. We're here in studio talking about the estate tax. And we're talking about how with every new political wave that comes into every new administration, the estate tax is always kind of like prime turkey targets to make changes, make adjustments, whether it is to make more money or to placate, as you said, to placate constituents, to have the ability to potentially make changes, keep a bunch of lawyers in business, and at the same time possibly make some more money back for the United States, or identify a place that, you know what, we're spending too much time and effort, so let's try and get money from a different place because we're not getting as much money as we thought we were from this whole estate tax.
So let's talk about sort of currently, what the lay of the land looks like, right, as they might say. So right now, your estate could be taxed at 40%.
This right now, by the way, is
40%.
Hold on. For everybody listening right now, this is what we like to call in the business as free legal advice.
It doesn't happen.
Free legal advice. So I can't give it. Huh? I'm not licensed to give free legal advice. No. However, the man next to me.
Yep. And you get what you pay for, by the way. You get what you pay for. Absolutely.
People got up at 7:00 in the morning. They're paying for
earlier.
it.
You wouldn't get up right at 7. You'd get up earlier.
Or if you're watching Holliston Cable, I think it airs on 7, right? Does he? Yeah, you guys get it on at 7
Christian
in the morning.
On every Saturday.
But then it's played throughout the day.
So
if you're watching this not on a Saturday, pretend it's Saturday. Pretend it's in the morning.
Well, yeah, but don't watch this show and then go stand on a soccer field. There might not be
There's no game.
There might not be soccer time. It might be Wednesday night.
Wednesday
go watch the selectors meeting.
Wednesday at 10:30. Yeah.
Even more exciting.
All right, go back to what you were saying.
So estates are taxed at 40%, okay? But you get an exemption. And the exemption is, you mentioned a minute ago, for the first $5.4 million.
Drop in the bucket.
So, and
nothing.
For couples, that gets you up to about 11 mil.
There you go.
Right?
10-8.
So, using that information, okay, the data.
But explain what that means. Explain what define exemption.
So what the feds say is the feds go, look, if you die holding some money, right? And again, this is the federal level, not the state. If you die holding some money, if your estate is under $5.49 million, you don't owe any estate tax.
Nothing. The estate tax, it does not
apply. The feds don't care. The feds don't care. Well, for purposes of today's discussion, we're talking about the feds. The feds don't care. So they're going to say, oh, poor Jay,
people always think
$5.48 million. We don't care.
People always think when you talk about the feds, I always think it's like the FBI. Like the FBI is like kicking my door.
They're going to burst
in estate tax right now.
5.49.
Get the checkbook out.
Let's see the number.
Write it. 40%.
But that's what happens. It's like a 5.49. We're not all that concerned about it. Okay, we're not worried about it. And by the way, just so you know, the average size of estates, this is 2013, paying the tax that year, $22.7 million.
That's the average
size of the estate that year.
So you're talking about so if you're
talking about some coin.
Yeah. So and so let's talk about what is included in my estate, right?
But one more. Just react to it. And then they paid an effective rate after deductions, after your tax guy gets to work and pounds on that number for a while, of about 16.6%.
So
all right. So you get a $22 million estate. and you
At
say,
the end
look,
of the day, I'm paying 16% on that $22 million because of largely because of my exemption, right? Because I have my exemption,
things like that.
Yep.
That's where you end up. All right. So the first question is, that's what you're sort of looking at the numbers.
Many numbers.
That's what you're dealing with. All right. That's the current sort of state of the nation, if you will, when it comes to estate taxes. So you said what's included in your estate?
Right.
Well, it's basically, make it nice and easy, everything you own when you die.
Yep, everything you own and anything anybody gets when you die.
That's right. That's right. So and so you get on the list, right? You own a house, half the house, that's in your estate.
Yep.
You have a big 401k, that's in your estate. If you owned life insurance, that's in your estate. Bank accounts, brokerage accounts, investment accounts.
But wait a minute, when I
name.
die, I'm dead, so I don't get the life insurance. But it's in my estate.
It's right. Your ownership of the life insurance.
Because I own the policy, and if
in
it's
your
a $10 million death benefit, and it goes to my wife, or it goes to my kids, or it goes to some foundation or something, it's part of my estate.
That's right. It's part of your estate, but the beneficiary of the life insurance policy isn't going to pay income on that.
Nope.
Because why do people love life insurance?
Because it's tax-free.
That's right. It's tax-free. Income tax-free. So somebody gets a $2 million life insurance policy. They don't pay anything for getting it, but your estate is going to have to add it up as part of what they own, right? So that's what your estate's. Now, we're talking about, forgetting probate avoidance and things like that. This is just the tax piece of your puzzle of how much do you owe the feds or the government or the state based on what you have in your name when you die. In Massachusetts, the number's $1 million. If you die with under $1 million in your estate, you don't owe the state of Massachusetts anything. And that's really the big number that everybody's most worried about. Why are they most worried about that number? Because for the most part, most people don't walk around with $5.49 million in their pocket. Right, and if they do,
they don't walk around with it in the equity in their house either.
And that's right. That's right. And if they do leave it all to their spouse, they're going to get a spousal deduction.
She gets it all.
So she gets it all. She walks away with the whole thing. So this is really when you're talking about. And so now it's the husband and wife, right? So now they have a total of $11 million. That's their exemption. That's their federal exemption. So now you're going to get to $11.1 million, and you say, I think we have a problem.
That's right. And remember, but what gets taxed? It's not my 11. Is it my whole estate that gets taxed on that? Right.
Well, they do a calculation.
That's right.
They do a very convoluted calculation that says if your estate has this much money in it, the tax is this dollar amount, and then it's a percentage of everything over that dollar.
Right, not unlike
so
the income tax. So there's a percentage.
That's right.
So your whole estate gets looked at. So it's not like they just start taxing on the like once you get over $11 million, not they just tax on that. Then because you qualify for the estate tax, then there, like you said, there's a convoluted formula that will then generate. Which is why you said before, look, if someone has an average of $22 million estate, but they're going to pay 16%, a total of 16% is the estate tax.
That's right. And I'll ask clients. I mean, I'll say to a client will come in. It hasn't happened a lot because the threshold is so high, but every once in a while somebody will come in and they'll say, look, I'm not paying a nickel more in taxes than I have to pay. And so I'll ask the client, well, you have a choice to make. You can have a more complicated estate plan, or you can have a less complicated estate plan. How do you feel about the taxes, right?
Wait a minute. So if I'm one of your big hitter clients, and I come in and I say, I don't know what to do. I have $30 million in my estate. And then my attorney says, well, you can have a more complicated estate plan, which, of course, will require me to do a lot more work.
Well, that requires me to do a lot more work, which means you get a much bigger fee.
Higher
right?
bill.
So, not everybody.
And then you get the whole you pay now or pay later.
You're going to pay me now.
That's right.
But I'll say that to clients. I'll say, look, what's the objective here? I mean, is the objective and this usually happens to people who are under the federal threshold, but they're over the mass threshold, right? And I'll say to them, look, the mass threshold is this. This is kind of how it works. So you ask the question, what are you really trying to do? If the goal is to get this money to your kids, and you're all going to be gone. Let's remember one thing: you're not around.
You're both
right?
are, but that's like you said,
both
right? They're both are going to be gone.
Yeah. So you're not paying it. Okay. So what do you want to do? Do you care that your kids are going to pay the estate tax and they're going to have to write a check? Or do you say, look, if my kids walk away with $4 million and they got to write a check, that's not my problem, right? They're well ahead of the game at that point.
They write a $250,000 check and you're like, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, too bad. Right? Bummer for you. By the way, you're writing a check with my money.
Yeah.
Right? So
right, that used to be my checkbook.
That's right. So clients will say, you know what? in the interest of keeping things simple, because the rest of my life is already so complicated, I just want to make it nice and easy. I want it to get from point A to point B, and if they get to break out the checkbook, I don't care.
Right.
That's fine. That's on them, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is when people inherit these assets, the other thing they get is a step up in basis, right? So people inherit, property, they inherit real estate, and we're in New England, right? Property that people bought, for $22,000 35 years ago when they moved into the house, that's now worth 400, 500, depending on what the number is. That's huge.
That's huge. You're not inheriting the house that that's right. Like, you're not inheriting the waterfront Eastham home that your parents bought for, like, back then, like a whopping $40,000 back in 1970, right?
Yeah.
So they spend, back then $40,000 was all their money, all the money they could have possibly imagined, all the money they're going to make in 20 years. But they buy that, and now that same property is worth $2 million. Guess what? You're not inheriting a $40,000, like a $40,000 property, and saying, "Oh, okay, good luck." Because guess what? Let's calculate some estate. Oh, you know what? Now you're like up $1.8 million in your estate. It doesn't work like that. Like you said, it's the step up. So when you inherit that property, they say, "Okay, how much is this thing worth the day that your grandfather died?" It's worth $2 million. Say, okay, now that's your basis. That's what step up means.
Yep. That's your new basis. That's right. And then you sell it, or you decide, what do you want to do, everybody? And everybody goes, well, what we think we're going to do is we think we're going to sell the property because, there's other taxes are really high on a $2 million
because it's worth $2 million.
And, oh, by the way, it is worth $2 million. And so you sell the property a week later for $2 million, and they hand you a check, and they go, well, the tax guy says to you next year when you do taxes, what's your basis on that property down in Wareham? Oh, it's $2 million.
Yeah.
Oh, and you sold it for how much? $2 million.
Right.
Great. What's my tax liability? Oh, sorry, what was that again?
Yeah, there's
Zero?
no capital gains.
No capital gains. That's not bad. I'll take that. That's a big deal. That's a good deal. So there are some things to think about. Because, by the way, that's very different. That's step-up basis, right? What about gift basis? Right?
That's different.
Gift basis is a different animal, right? And this happens all the time where people say, look, I talked to a friend of mine, and
it's always a friend.
It's always a friend, and they watch a lot of TV, and this is what they did. They gave the house to their kids.
Yeah, they sold it to them for $1.
Well, that's right. Even that they think it's a deal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and they always make a joke too, because when they do that, some wise guy in the room always goes, "I got it.
Yeah,
I got it."
Oh, yeah, I would have given you 10.
Reaches into his pocket, he takes out the dollar, makes a big show of it. Ha ha ha! I only have 99 cents, and everybody laughs about it, right? And they all laugh about it until they die.
Everybody laughs about it.
They laugh
if you're doing it, right? I mean, I don't think they laugh if everybody does.
Well, shut
up, Uncle Fred.
Well, they laugh until they get the tax bill, right?
Yeah.
And here's why they laugh, because the gift basis issue is when you give property to somebody, you're giving them your cost basis, right?
Yeah.
So if granddad's house was $40,000 back in the day when he bought it, and he gives it to the kids,
guess what?
and then the kids sell it for $2 million, and they think, hi-oh, we're in.
But remember, this is different than estate tax, right? We're talking about capital gains.
Yeah.
tax, right?
But we're talking about the idea of why people complain about the estate tax without necessarily understanding some of the benefits of inheriting property. And even if there is an estate tax,
you pay the tax on it?
They take over here, but they give you over here, right? And so just to close out the gift basis idea, if Grandpa gives you the house that he paid $40,000 for, and then you sell it after he dies, you pay the taxes on everything over $40,000.
$1.6 million.
Yeah. 1.9.
Oh no,
60.
sorry. I'm sorry. It didn't sell for 400.
Yeah, 1.960, right? So that's important because everybody says, "Oh, the gift tax, the estate tax, what a scam." It's not a scam. The government gives you a lot for getting property, right? So you just need to understand that's.
Well, and on the other hand, on the other side of that is that no one wants to pay extra taxes that they don't have to pay. I mean, the tax code's written, it's specific, and so as long as you're like within the letter of the law, of course you're going to want to minimize your tax because everybody, we as a country, we as like citizens of a country, we pay taxes. Everybody pays taxes, and it's the more you make, the more tax you're going to pay, and that's just the way the system's made. But the idea of paying taxes that you don't necessarily have to pay, or that you can do things in such a way, you can construct your estate plan in such a way where you can minimize that tax, or minimize it as long as you stay within the letter of law. Then of course you're going to do that. Why wouldn't I do that, right? So if I can if I can build in my estate plan that has trust, I can have pour over trust, where I can make sure that I'm keeping my I'm staying under the federal threshold by the way I position my assets, and I do it in such a way that makes sense. I do it in such a way that it's going to enable me to, like you said before, like to accomplish my goals. What I really want to do, I want to pass this on to my heirs. I want to have my grandkids, to enjoy my property or my vacation home or whatever I want to do. I'm building this. So I want to minimize taxes, but we always do this in our property set. I'm like, look, don't let taxes wag the dog.
No, you hear it all the time. You hear it all the time.
About what you really want to do. Like people kind of shoehorn themselves into things. So I've minimized my state death tax or my state estate tax, but at the same time I've limited my flexibility in being able to do what I want to do as far as passing my estate on to my heirs.
And we talked about it a minute ago on property that you get and then you sell. If you sell property, you're going to pay capital gains tax, and that could be 15%, it could be 20%, right? Depending on where you are in the bracket. So if that, how many times have you had a client that has a gigantic position in either a piece of real estate or in a stock, and you say to them, well, why don't you sell the position? And they say to you, because I'm at the finish line, right? Because I'm not going to sell it because I have such a huge gain on it that I'm going to pay not a ton. I'm going to pay a chunk of bill in taxes.
I mean,
but if I just leave it to my kids and they inherit it, then they can sell it the day after I'm gone.
Yeah.
They pay nothing.
That's right.
So why would I bother doing it? So you take that issue of gigantic estate tax relief in the form of $11.5 million, if you will, and then you combine that with the idea that you're not going to pay any capital gains taxes on anything that you inherit, and that the estate tax becomes less of an issue, right?
Sure.
And it's less of an issue. It's not the burden that people make it out to be. And the other thing is, not a lot of people pay it. And so, meaning that not a lot of people have to file it because they just don't carry that much wealth.
They just don't have $10, $11 million.
No, it's a small subset of the population. So in 2015, this is from an article in the New York Times. In 2015, only 11,917 estates filed in the Fed form is Form 706, and in Massachusetts it's M706. And then out of those people, about 5,000 of them owed any tax at all, right? So,
and of those 5,000, like 3,500 of them were people who owned buildings in Manhattan.
That's right.
There you go, right? Like I ain't selling, and they're looking at their big building, right? Because don't you do that whenever I go to New York? I always look around and I just go, somebody owns that building.
Yeah,
somebody owns that building. Some group, which includes people, own that building.
Yeah,
and you're like, and these aren't like the big ones. These aren't the famous ones. These are just like
just a random non-marquee building. That's exactly right.
Random on 9th Avenue building. Like wow, somebody owns that, and it's worth, I don't know, more than several of the planets combined. Yeah.
But think about this. This article in the Times goes on to mention a couple of things. They said, look, a lot of this money that passes from person A to person B, it's never been taxed. It has never been taxed, right? So you compare the tax burden, if you will, on the estate tax to the very wealthy, to the payroll taxes that you and I pay every single payday. It's a different animal, right? Yeah. So, you're talking about the idea that is it a transfer of wealth scheme? Is it a transfer of wealth mechanism? It doesn't raise a ton of dough for the feds, but it's still there, and it affects such a small subset of the population that you really do have to sort of look at it and say, is this really, if they're going to repeal it, which it's affecting so few people, and the people that's affecting are so way up here on the scale, is it a giveaway? I don't know. Is it a giveaway to a subset of your support base? I don't know. But it comes up.
Then politics aside, actually, I'm sorry, reverse that. No. Politics right back in the bowl. Yeah. That's exactly what people will argue, is that it's a political scheme, and it's going to be like, hey, look, you know what? I know a certain administration probably runs with a lot of people who could qualify for that state tax, and say, hey, guess what? No more state tax. Look what I just did for you. Look how much money I just saved your estate, which, by the way, you're going to be dead anyway when so. Well,
but there's other taxes that feed into this, and again, the article goes on to talk about how you have the estate tax, which is one issue, and you have the gift tax, right? And the gift tax which is amazing to me because a lot of folks still have it baked in that it's $10,000. That $10,000 number was out there so long that people just still jump on that number. They always so you can give away like $10,000, right? I'm like, well, actually it's gone up a little bit.
Or
it's
14,000. Anybody who has a different,
pulse.
Everyone has a different Social Security number than you do.
Yeah, anybody has a pulse, you can give away $14,000. So again, for people who are looking to, and at some point, and you may have this conversation, I'm sure, with your clients where you say, look, we planned for getting you to retirement. You retired, and then we planned for you spending X amount of dollars through those active, whatever you want to define as the active years, whether it's 60, 65,
golden, platinum,
up to 75.
Give it a precious metal.
Talked about that. Yep.
Give it a precious metal.
But at some point, at 75, you say, look, you know what? You won the game. Right?
Yeah.
You're not going to run out. Your spending takes on a much more predictable pattern at this point.
Well, we determine, it's like, look, here's money you're never going to use.
That's right.
You're not going to use this money.
That's right.
And if you are, you're making something up to use for it.
That's right.
So and you're right. Like like when you plan with your clients, like, well, we've been talking about this for a long time. You kind of know. I know that you want to leave some money for your, or you ask the question, do you want to leave some money for your kids? Oh, of course I do. Yeah,
yep.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Or some people may say the opposite. I don't care.
Well, but people will say, okay, look, I'm 75, I'm 78, or whatever the number is. I won it. I get it. I'm going to get to the finish line. I don't have to worry about it. So now I want to do some other things. Right now, I want to benefit some people while I'm alive, and I can see the benefit. I can see the impact it has on their life. So I'm not worried about the estate tax. I'm worried about doing some gifting.
Yeah, and you know what? And you bring up that's a great point, because in it is the that's when you gave the example of, okay, so if I inherit $1 million worth of stock or $1 million piece of property versus if I get it gifted to me, there's a different taxation on that.
That's right.
But at the same time, if my goal is that I want to see my daughter, my 50-year-old daughter, enjoy, like be able to put their kids through college, right? Instead of waiting for me to die, which I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yep,
it could happen tomorrow. Right. It could happen, 15 years from now, whatever. Then you say, look, I can start gifting this. I want to make this happen now, right? And again, it doesn't interfere with my retirement plan. I'm going to have enough money for retire. Right. So yeah, let's make it happen. And I'm not letting taxes wag the dog on
Well, the rules are different too, because if you want to write, we talk about that $14,000 check, you can write that $14,000 check, and that means that you file no gift tax return. You're reducing the value of your estate. So for people who are on that $1 million threshold bubble and they're worried about whether or not Massachusetts is going to get involved and stick their hand in it, they say, well, look, you know what? If you're giving away $14,000 checks to 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people, that number gets pretty big pretty fast. And you're not limited to $14,000 if you write it directly to a medical institution or an educational institution.
That's right.
So if UMass is $25,000, write a check to UMass for $25,000.
No, if they're going to UMass, they're paying it for themselves, because UMass is only $25,000, and they're not going to get any help from Grandpa.
No, that's right. That's right.
All right, you know what? Let's take a quick dance break, and then we'll take a regular. Right, let's take our dance break. You're not dancing.
I'm not dancing. Absolutely right, I'm not.
We'll be right back on Money in the Law. Jay Marsden, John Drohan, My FM 101.3. Listen to the music. It's awesome. We're back on Money in the Law, My FM 101.3 with Jay Marsden and John Drohan on a fine Saturday morning, or if you're listening to this telecast across the world. And we were just talking about estate tax, we're talking about gift tax, we're talking about all kinds of different kinds of taxation. But before we're going to get back into that, we have some special treat for all you viewers out there. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see it. We are going to take a quick dance break.
Quick dance break? Only for Phoebe. Only for Phoebe.
Here we go.
That's it.
We're dancing.
That's it. Done. Good job. There you go, Phoebe. That's my quick dance break.
You're not a bad. You're not a bad dancer. I got you're musical.
I got some skills. I got some skills.
You're like Vince Vaughn and Wedding Crashers.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I'm an excellent dancer. Yeah.
Well, so my wife loves to listen to like the '80s, some Pandora '80s stations. So it's not unusual to come in and see her, breaking it down.
She's not afraid.
Breaking it down.
Yeah,
she's not breaking it down.
Right.
So the kids laugh because they're like, "What are you doing, Dad?" I'm like, "Dad's got skills.
Dad can dance.
Every once in a while, not that long anymore. No. Dad gets a little winded on the dance floor.
That's right. There's an endurance issue.
That's right. So working on the endurance issue. If I got invited to a wedding, I'd have to go immediately into like dance floor training.
Yeah, right. You have to cut back. Probably drop about 5 pounds before the
5
wedding.
5 pounds. I have to go to a strict diet.
Start drinking a lot of water.
That's right.
I got to get to the wedding hydrated.
That's right.
Because usually when you get to a wedding, and in these days and age, most weddings are open bar. So if I'm going to go to a wedding, if I don't come hydrated, I'm probably looking at a bad day.
Well, plus the X dehydrates me. So I want to make sure I take care of that.
That's right.
So we're talking estate taxes. We're talking about gifting. We're talking about the impact of a change in the estate tax that once again, with the changeover in administrations, is back on the table again. It's always exciting because
all you guys in Manhattan
just keeps it moving. Well, but we talked about the $14,000. I mean, for people who are on the bubble, we talked about it before the break. That's a big deal. It's a big deal to give away that $14,000. And you talk about it on a conceptual scale. if you've got younger, grandkids, for example, and I'm going to say younger, I say over 18, but you're trying to sort of teach them the idea. I mean, you know how much I love the brokerage account, and this is an opportunity for you to open up a bunch of brokerage accounts with some kids and sit down and talk to your kids or grandkids about how the market works and how to save and how to have.
We're going to invest with Grandpa.
How to develop a portfolio. But it's important.
It is. No, it's great.
We've talked about it before. It's an ownership society, right? Nobody cares anymore that you did or did not save ever, right?
Yeah.
What's it, the grasshopper and the ant, right? You didn't save, you didn't do anything. Well, you're on your own. You're on your own, and nobody cares. And you don't want those options. And if you have an opportunity, you've probably done those projections or calculations where you say, look, a $14,000 investment just left alone.
Just leave it alone.
Forget that you even have
Put
it.
In the S&P 500.
At 18 is going to grow exponentially, right? And that's just
it could, right?
That's right. And if you're talking about an annual gifting strategy, there's a real opportunity to put together help somebody put a portfolio together and talk about it and say, look, at some point you're going to want to buy a house. You're not going to spend all this. You're going to take your down payment money out of this, right?
I just thought of a great, and here's the thing, so for those grandparents out there that kind of compete with the other grandparents, here's a great way to send your grandparents' stock soaring. All right, so if you
want to see the kids fight, if you want to sit next to you at Thanksgiving,
that's right.
Like it's a WWE cage match.
Do you want to sit next to Mom's dad, or do you want to sit right over here? There you go. You sit with come on, sit next to Grandpa, because you know what Grandpa does? After this, after dinner.
If you don't think that Gramps isn't going to have the checkbook in his top breast pocket, so that the top of it with the pen is just sticking out of the top of the.
And he's got a big checkbook too.
Oh yeah,
He doesn't have a red. He's got his is oversized.
It's the commercial checks, right? Just make no mistake what he's here for, right?
That's right.
And it is get out of the way time. That's it. That is exactly right. Yep. How come nobody wants to sit next to me
after Easter dinner? Like, hey guys, come on, let's go into the dining room and let's sit down and have a talk about this.
Everybody bring your most recent quarterly statement, because Pops wants to sit down
and the other grandfather is just sitting there like, oh my God.
And actually, if Pops really wants to teach a lesson, Pops is going to say, whose ever portfolio is doing the best.
Yeah.
Not everybody's getting 14. No. I can give 14, but not everybody's getting 14.
We're going to reward you for
your
stock picks
and your losers. That's exactly, because
what do we have for the losers, Judge?
Because that's how life works, right?
I mean, why haven't we thought of this before?
How great? We could do a whole movie on this. How great would this be, right? So that's something to think about. Now, the one other issue that came up was the idea behind the estate tax, or eliminating the estate tax, was that it was going to save small businesses and farms. That was always the story, right? And whenever they trot the estate tax repeal out, somebody flies into some Midwestern state and says, I'm here to save your family farm because the estate tax is killing everybody.
You're going
blah,
to
blah,
get
blah,
you don't
blah,
have any cash.
Right?
You don't have any money to pay that.
So back to the same idea, back to the same article in the Times. Basically what they say is this is a false pretense. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't. Very, very small, same idea. Even if the value of farmland or assets held by a business grows over years, the estate tax business, it's a very small impact on those businesses. It's not something that becomes a real issue. And they go back to the idea of, again, do the math, especially with an $11 million exemption for couples. It just isn't that big.
I'm sure that there's circumstances or just bad luck or just some kind of perfect storm things that happen, to people or that are in that situation. Like, business goes bad at the wrong time, and somebody passes away untimely. They probably didn't do the proper planning, or they have dated planning, like outdated. They're on the estate tax of 3 administrations ago. Yeah. So I'm sure that there's times when you're like, oh, I wish that things were different, or I wish that things. But you're right. In order to impose a nationwide tax and enforce it, and then all of the collateral things that go along with all the work and all the thought and all the discussion, all the time that gets spent on it, and money as well, right?
Yep.
Advertising money, everything that gets spent on it. Is it worth it? Is it worth what the government is going to benefit from?
Well, first of all, is it even going to be an issue, first of all? And I will say this. I will say one other thing. When I was working at a small mutual fund company in town, one of the things that they talked about all the time with estate planning was this issue of liquidity, right? And they always talked about, if you're going to get hit with an estate tax bill, you're going to have to
some money.
pay the feds, and you're going to have some money to do that.
Well, that's it, right?
And I will say this. People think that that's an issue, or they used to think about it as that's an issue for people with sizable estates. The people that we're making fun of and say, look, they're probably, even at this level, they might get touched by the estate tax because they have massive estates. And that's true. I mean, that is an issue. If somebody has a sizable portfolio and for some reason they are subject to even the estate tax at the state level, they're going to have to come up with some money.
They're spending some money.
And so you do have to figure out, people will inherit things all the time that are somewhat illiquid. And those issues, and I've said this to people before, that even not gigantic estates, you do have a need for some liquidity. And so if all somebody has is a portfolio that's focused heavily on real estate, and then there's a tax bill that's due as a result of that, there's only one of a couple of ways that you can tap into that
you got to pay
value.
the bill. Yeah.
That's right. Well, you either got to sell a piece of property, or you have to figure out a way to restructure the estate so that you can put yourself in a position to get a loan, depending on who wants what in the property, and that takes time.
Yeah.
And the feds get a little impatient, obviously waiting for their tax money, but that takes time. And I'll give you an example. And again, they use this reference in the Times article, but they talk about a guy who passed away the year that the estate tax had been completely repealed.
What's his name? George Steinbrenner?
Nope. Although he was one of those, but there was a guy that passed away, and his estate was worth about $9 billion billion dollars. And the challenge was that if he had passed away 3 months earlier, the estate would have been subject to about a 40% estate, and they would have had to come up with a sizable chunk of dough. And the problem is that when that happens, the only way to do that is you got to sell it. You got to sell assets.
A fire sale.
Right? That's exactly right, and that's the risk. The risk is you're forced into an opportunity to have to sell something that you necessarily probably didn't want to sell, but because you have to liquidate so much of the estate.
Or it was just a bad time to sell it, right?
That's right.
Because especially when you're talking about, property of that size, the people that are interested in it it's a much smaller scale. It's a much smaller group of people, so they know the deal. And if you're a conglomerate, or if you're a person, or if you're a business that is in the market of buying, $600 million buildings, then you know what? They know what they're doing. They're not just gonna say and offer you, your top dollar for that if they know that they can get that building at a lower cost. So there's that whole kind of dance that you have to do, when you're in those situations. I mean, and granted, those are very rare.
Well, they are very rare. But I mean, and again, they're folks that you say to yourself, if you're regular Joe, if you will, and you say, look, I got a house and maybe I got a couple of other another piece of property and I get a couple bucks in 401k. Some guys get $9 billion. I'm not really boo-hoo-hooing that he's going to write a $4 billion check to the feds, right?
Yeah.
So
he is,
but he's boo-hooing. His kids are. His kids are. Yeah. At that point, you're like. But the other piece of it is, again, this is where we've always talked about. If you're working with advisors, you work. At some point, it makes sense to maybe not do your own taxes. Your estate's getting complicated, or your portfolio's getting complicated, and it's becoming more and more. Then this is where working with the advisors and the tax person who's going to say to you, look, let's get together.
Always turns into
it's October. Let's get somebody to sit down and figure out what you're going to do before year end to make some decisions. It's not just I hand my tax guy my W-2s April 14th and hope I get some good news. Working with the tax advisor, if you think you're bumping into some of these issues, they will help guide you through that. That's right. They'll tell you, here's some things that you might want to be doing, right? You might want to do these things.
Well, the $9 billion estate that's all well and good, but if you bring it down to the level of, and we've used this example before, where it could get dicey. So let's go back to my Cape Cod property. So my Cape Cod property that is worth $2 million, it's on the water, and guess what? I have 3 brothers and sisters, and there's 4 of us, and we own this property, and we inherit this. Let's say we inherit this property, and now it's like, okay. So and there's a tax. There's a state estate tax that goes along with this property, right? Along with any other assets, right? So let's say the only thing that they have, let's say the only thing is that $2 million estate. There's going to be then we're going to have to write a check on this.
That's right.
Then it becomes dicey because, well, okay, in the perfect world, we all, kick in whatever the number is going to be. Say we all have to kick in $50,000. We'll make it up, right? So everybody has to kick in $50,000. For 3 people, it may be, okay, I'll do it because I use the thing. And then we get back to like, well, I never used the property.
Right.
And now I got to, what I got to do, I got to write you a $50,000 check in order to pay for this. So I have 25% interest in this property that I never use and I don't want to keep. And if I had my way, I'd say sell it right now and give me my $500,000 and I'd be, let's
right off into the sunset. Happy as a clam. Yeah, that's right.
So that's where that idea of liquidity is really important. And if you have liquidity, great. But if you don't have liquidity, then be prepared to make some liquidity.
Yeah.
There's going to be some liquidity needed in these estate issues.
Well, and this is where a lot of the insurance guys, they are like, we joke about them all the time on the show, but this is where the insurance guys will come in and say, look, if you've got some legacy money that you know you're not going to use, depending on what your health looks like, depending on what you're doing, it may make sense to look at an insurance policy, not because you're looking to leave some money to anybody, but because you're looking to leave some money to your estate, and then that money that gets left to your estate can then be used to pay off some estate taxes that might be due, and then everybody gets to keep the house if that's the objective. But if it's not the objective, there's a bigger conversation that goes on there.
Those insurance guys, they can have that conversation like
in their sleep
all day
in their sleep. That's right.
All day long, and it sounds good. And you know what? In many cases, again, it's a case by case basis. But in many cases, it very well could be the
absolutely
right answer.
Right. It could be the right solution.
We beat up our insurance guys, but I tell you what, there you go. There's your answer. So if I have a $250,000 death benefit from my life insurance policy, and I have a $2 million estate, bada boom, bada bing.
Yep.
Instant liquidity, no probate, right? There's no probate. It's just death certificate. The check goes. The beneficiary gets the check. Then they say, okay, here are my bills. I have to pay for my funeral. I have to pay for this. I have to pay for, I have an estate tax bill, but boom, and it's done. And then my property, the property passed on, the estate tax settlement is completed, and there's no more, and now we own the property outright.
And so this is the idea of saying, hey, look, you know what? That I had a policy. I didn't need it anymore. It was a life insurance policy to create basically to create an instant estate that I needed for X numbers of years. Mm-hmm. Now I don't need that anymore, but I have this other solution that I need to solve, and does this work? And sometimes people have these policies. Yeah. Sometimes they can assign them. Sometimes they can put them into a trust. Sometimes they can do all kinds of things with them that may or may not work to address this one issue, which is, do I have to deal with the estate tax wherever it goes, whatever the current administration decides is going to work for it, and by the way, and this is something we talk about all the time on the show, and this is not where sitting poolside down in Florida, listening to what your friend Sully did up in Chicago with his plan, that's going to be different than
Sully,
your plan, right?
That's Sully, you know what? He came from money. He
might have. But the point is, at some point, everybody's plan goes in a different direction, right?
It goes in their own direction.
That's right. It goes where they go, right? And you can't get caught up into this. This is what we did. This is what this person did. This is what that person did, because
it goes where they go.
It goes where they go. Your plan goes.
That's all you. Can I use it?
Right on the website? No.
Can I?
Absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not.
Wait a minute.
Not without writing a check.
This is a joint show.
Not without writing a check.
This is a joint show.
That's right. Well,
Christian was there. He saw it. He heard me say it.
It's only a joint show.
Play the tape back.
It's a joint show to you. The first one on the car or on the website. That's it. That's right. So those are some issues. So those are things that you want to think about. The estate tax come and go. It's going to stick around. When you work with advisors, you can hopefully pick up the phone and say, hey, does the potential... And by the way, if you call up and say, the estate tax is going to change, I saw it, I read about it, what do we have to do? Yeah. The answer is going to be, until something happens...
Don't do a thing.
Absolutely nothing. Don't do anything.
Don't make adjustments based on hearsay.
Because as we all know, you never know when these types of legislative, brouhahas come up, until something actually gets decided and passes Congress and gets signed by somebody, nothing happens. And so a lot of the people will tell you, this is what I think the changes might look like, but until they actually get codified, there's nothing for us to do, and it's not worth it to you to try to predict or think about how things are going to change and figure out whether or not you need to respond to something, because you can zig when you should zag.
Yeah, it doesn't. But it doesn't mean don't review. It doesn't mean don't look at it. It doesn't mean don't like evaluate kind of what's your overall plan. And again, the answer of like, what is it that I want to do? How do I want to see this all? What do I want to see when all the dust settles? That doesn't change. You should always be kind of reviewing that and thinking that through. But don't make any decisions. Say, oh, well, I think this is going to happen, so we better start gifting our money away, or we better start,
And barring these crazy changes, I tell people you might do 3 plans your entire life, right? You're going to have a couple of kids, and you're going to say, you know what, now we're going to do the right thing. We're going to name some guardians, and you're going to do that. That's your first plan. And then hopefully that holds for a long time, and there's no major changes, and knock on wood, everybody's fine and healthy. And then you're going to get to your late 50s, and you're going to say, you know what, we've actually accumulated some stuff, right? And these accounts have grown, and the 401k is big, and then we've accumulated some property. So now we got to figure out how we get it from ourselves to our kids and how we avoid probate. And then there's going to be a third conversation when you realize we do have enough. We are going to get to the finish line. What of the assets that we own are legacy assets? And then what's the best way to structure getting them to kids, whether it's now or later, and managing the tax implications of getting that to them, and talking about long-term care costs and what happens if somebody gets sick. So, you'll have the conversation a couple of times, and barring some change in somebody's situation with their health changes or they get some bad news, that's generally the blueprint of how often you're really going to have to sort of turn this thing over and look at it. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to come up along the way, but assuming everything kind of holds with a somewhat predictable pattern, that's really what you're looking at.
And we know things aren't always predictable.
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. No.
And on that note,
so that brings us to the end.
Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen on your day today on Saturday? So just have a great day and have a great week. And please join us again next week on Money in the Law with my dear friend Jay Marsden from the Marsden Law Group. I'm John Drohan, Christian from the Holliston Cable Access TV. We'll be back next week talking about money in the law and all
kinds of great stuff.
Fun stuff. We will see, hear, and talk at you next week.